In this video, we're going to show you how to install the strut on your Nissan Versa, located on the left front side of your vehicle. The process for this is the same as the passenger side. Using a pry tool, you want to go ahead and remove our hubcap here. Go between the wheel and the cap and gently pry out. Work your way around. Pop that off and set it aside. Once you have that off, you can use a 22mm socket with your impact gun. Loosen and remove the lug nuts. Once you have the lug nuts removed, remove the wheel and set it aside. Using a 14mm, we want to go ahead and loosen our nut here on the swivel link. On the back side of the link is also 14mm, so we're going to put our wrench on that and loosen and remove this nut. Set that nut aside. I want to go ahead and disconnect our ABS wire right here. I'm just going to pull it out of the bracket. There's a rubber grommet here, and there's one on the other side. Just pop this out like so. Disconnect our flex hose from the strut assembly itself. There's a little metal U-shaped bracket here. We're going to use our chisel. You can use a punch. And we're just dislodging this down and off. Once that's off, we should be able to wiggle this free. There we go, that is now separated. So our ABS wire and our flex hose is now separated. Here's our retainer clip. I'm just going to go ahead and set that aside. On the top of our strut assembly here, this is bolted to the knuckle itself with two large bolts. Using a 21mm socket and our wrench, let's go ahead and remove the nuts off of the bolts here. Now on some vehicles here, the alignment is set by adjusting this knuckle in or out and it'll pivot. I'm going to go ahead, before we remove anything here from the knuckle, I'm going to go ahead and use my crayon and I'm going to mark on both sides where the strut lines up with the knuckle. That way there, when I reinstall this here, I'll have a preliminary setting for alignment. After this job is done, you want to have the vehicle brought down to a repair shop, have the alignment properly done to prevent abnormal tire wear. With this in this position right now, we're going to use our hammer. We're just going to gently tap these out. Now, if these are stuck in here, you don't want to use a hammer. You want to go ahead and put something on this here and spin this bolt out. But ours are pretty loose. Do the same on the bottom. Pop it out. Now, the knuckle itself is going to want to swing down a little bit. Make sure your fingers and stuff are out of the way. I'm going to wiggle this around. There we go. Now, when our knuckle drops down, it can cause an issue with our inner CV axle. I like to use a small pry bar, lift up, and put the pry bar underneath the control arm and inside the frame assembly. This will rest down. That'll support that area here so that we don't have abnormal pressure on our CV axle. Let's head on up top and remove the 3 bolts securing the strut up into the engine bay. Starting with some tape, what we want to do is line this up with our wiper blades. I'm going to do this on both the driver and passenger side. This is going to help us on reinstallation, making sure that our wiper arms are lined up. Remove the 2 covers covering the wiper arm nuts. There's a little notch on the back here. You're going to put your pry tool in here, gently pry up. Do this on both sides. You can use a pick as well. Pop those covers off and set them aside. Using a 14mm socket with our swivel and small extension, go ahead and remove this nut. Do the same for the other wiper arm. I'll go ahead and grab that wiper arm, lift up. I'm going to wiggle this off. Slide that off. I'm going to do the same for the other side here. On the bottom side of our cowl, there's going to be a series of these clips going across the bottom. We're missing a couple here, but there are little pinch tabs on the top and the bottom. Just use your pliers, reach in there, pinch those tabs together, and pull those clips off. We're going to do that all the way across the front, removing the remainder. Okay. Go ahead and grab that cowl. I'm going to lift this up, wiggle it up and off, and remove it from the vehicle. Just kind of set it down. See washer and nozzle hose right here. Just want to go ahead. There's a separation right here. Going to just disconnect this, separate the plastic port from that hose, remove this cowl altogether, and set it aside. Now on the top of the strut assembly is going to be 3 bolts. There's this one right here, and there's this one right here. And then where we remove the cowl, we're going to take it inside. You can see one right down inside here. So you want to go ahead and remove these here. That's going to allow us to go ahead and drop the strut out of the body. Using a 13mm socket on your impact or your ratchet, whatever you want to use, we're going to loosen these bolts here. I'm going to switch over to the hand ratchet to go ahead and get the inboard one here in the cowl area. Now as you're removing this bolt here, you can see the strut assembly starting to move. Now this will get to a point where that strut assembly will drop out and away. So what you can do, you can reach into the wheel well, hold that strut assembly while you do this. I'm just going to get this out a little bit more. All right, so I'm going to support the strut here. All right, the bolt is out. I want to be careful not to damage any of these wires or anything down here, and remove that strut assembly like so. Now we have our strut set up in the compressor tool here. I like to go ahead and make sure that when I install our upper bearing plate that everything lines up properly with this here. So I'm going to come up and I just kind of mark the spring. Sometimes it's not as critical, but that way there, when I reinstall upper bearing plate, these holes line up and everything is copacetic. Not always necessary. Now on the top here, we have a nut that secures the spring and the upper bearing plate to the strut assembly itself. Now this is locked in. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this nut, but I'm not going to remove it yet. Now before I remove this completely, I do want to apply some pressure to compress this coil spring. All right, our bearing plate is loose. The spring is compressed just enough. I'm going to go ahead and remove this nut, and once that nut is loose, the strut should drop out from the bottom. Go ahead and lower the strut assembly down. Remove the nut, put that aside. Now we have our new strut cartridge here. We have this compression rod in place. What I'm going to do, push this down, compress that rod, and remove this here. And you can see that rod is coming up. I'm going to take our old unit here. And we want to remove the bump stop, remove the dust boot, and swap this on over here. We'll pull the nut off. Now at this point, we can go ahead and feed the strut cartridge up and into place. Now on the base here, there's going to be a notch that sits lower, and that is where what we call the tail of the spring is going to sit. I'm going to feed our strut up into place. The center comes up through that bearing plate, and we're going to put the nut on the top. Just going to get it on there a few threads. Now if you notice here, when we removed it, our crayon mark for the upper bearing plate had shifted, so we're going to twist this back into position with this line here. This line should line up with the center, roughly the center of this portion here where the knuckle is going to fit. The tail of our spring is lined up here. I'm going to slowly release the spring. Not going to release it all the way. I just want a little bit of spring tension on that strut assembly. Our line lines up here. We're good with that. Just going to twist that just a tiny bit. That's it right there. I'm going to go ahead and snug down this nut a little bit. All right, that nut is bottomed out. Keep an eye on that strut assembly. We are now relaxed. Our line lines up with our strut. Now this nut on the top center does have to get torqued to 46 foot-pounds. And as we're trying to torque this here, you can see the upper bearing plate is moving. So I want to make sure that stays lined up. We will torque this once the upper bearing plate is installed into the chassis of the vehicle. That'll hold it in place, so we can do that. All right, we're going to feed our strut up into place. Now holding this in place, I'm going to reach up and over the fender, and I'm going to install 2 of the bolts on the top. All right, get one of these bolts started on the top here. Rotate that strut a little bit. I'm going to get the back one over here installed. I want to go ahead and lower the 3rd bolt down on the back here. All right, at this point here, we've got them all started by hand. Now I'm going to line these up. We actually have little dirt marks on here where the bolts were set before. So I'm going to line those up. And then we'll snug down that back one with our ratchet. going to torque down these 3 nuts to 21 foot-pounds. Just go ahead and torque this down to 46 foot-pounds. There we go. Now I want to go ahead and line this up. I'm going to lift up this here. Now we have our pry bar underneath the control arm. Pull that out. That's going to give us some adjustability here. I'll take a little bit of wiggling here to get that in. Here we go. Pop that one in. I'll do the same for the lower. I'm just going to want to work that strut knuckle back and forth. Once that pops through, pop that through. Now previously we went ahead and we marked the knuckle with the yellow crayon. So this is what we're going to want to do. Make sure that lines up. Go ahead and snug down your bolts. Install your ABS wire. Pull the brake line through on the other side. I'm going to install our horseshoe clip onto the brake line. Line that up, and then we'll tap that up into place with the hammer. Secured, secured. Install the sway bar link. Torque down this nut to 27 foot-pounds. Let's torque down our strut bolts to 129 foot-pounds. When we install our cowl, first we have to connect the windshield washer fluid here. So take the 2 pieces of hose, join those together. I want to take your cowl, bring this over, and get this set down into place. Now installing our wiper cowl, what we want to do is make sure that it's fit all the way up and seated tight up against the base of the windshield. So in doing so, we're just going to make sure that all of our plastic locking tabs and everything line up. All right, we have that fit in. Okay, we're pressed up into position. Now these clips that we removed earlier, what they do is they lock the upper cowl to the metal cowl below. So just press those in and you're going to hear them and feel them snap into place. Ours was missing a couple, so I'm going to put 2 over here, 1 on the driver's side. If you have all of your clips, go ahead and install all of them. Our next step is to install the wiper blades. We're going to install our passenger side first, and we have our tape here from where our wiper blade was sitting. Go ahead and line that up. With that in its general location, we're going to do the same for the driver's side. Let's go ahead and install the 2 nuts that secure this. And you want to make sure that those are on pretty tight. Do the same for the passenger side. Lastly, pop on your caps here. They put this line right up on the top. Press them down. They'll pop into place. Remove the tape off of the windshield as your alignment guide. Now that we have everything torqued into place, I want to go ahead and install our wheel, torque that into place. Make sure you bring the vehicle down and get an alignment performed at this time. That way there is going to prevent abnormal tire wear. Let's go ahead and install your wheel. Install the lug nuts. We're going to get all 4 of them started by hand. Spin those on a few threads. By doing this here and not just zipping them on with the impact gun will prevent cross-threading of the threads. With all 4 of them started, let's go ahead and snug them down. Let's torque down the lug nuts to 83 foot-pounds. Now, if you're installing your center cap or hub cap here, you want to go ahead and go around the perimeter and locate the notch for the valve stem. Locate the valve stem on the wheel. Line that up first. Once that's lined up, go ahead and gently work your way around the perimeter, locking this on. Once that's all set, you are done.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.